The reason we see things are different is not because things are different. It's because we have problems in each of the individual studies. Apple CEO, Microsoft CEO, I'm talking about Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, they all went and they started their company based on what Xerox Palo Alto Research Center was doing. So innovation was done within Xerox, but they couldn't sell it. Like the higher you go, both the quality and quantity of feedback goes down. Goes down. Nobody's willing to tell you the real stuff. So I have a data set of about 600 companies from India about last 10 years. Why companies are investing in training and development? Should you even train everybody? Or should you just train few selective people? If you have to select what makes a person a high performer from a low performer, analysis, what we know, 70% of it can be explained by just two things. One, intelligence, and second, And people are introvert, people are extrovert.
Right.
It seems there is a genetic basis to it. People who are extrovert, they need a certain dopamine, and the only way you get it is by speaking up. Are you agreeable? Are you easy to get along? Good teammates. But again, agreeable people are good as teammates, but they're not likely to become a team leader.
So how does one get themselves out of the comfort zone?
Well, you can't.
This podcast is with Professor Amit Nandkeolyar. He's a professor at Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad. He's a fantastic professor, teaches leadership, negotiation analysis, and his current work is on studying how we as individuals and teams adapt to extreme challenges. So if you are somebody who goes through extreme challenges, this podcast is for you. Otherwise, pass it on to someone you really know. I hope you enjoy it. So, Professor, you are instrumental in helping a lot of organizations, senior level, top CEOs, CMOs, CXOs, to think bigger, to revision, to relook at the next level of their growth. And of course, you're the professor of one of the most premier organizations. So I'm going to steal this moment and really cheat this moment and hope that in the next couple of minutes that we have with you, we can get some bit of this whole lot of research and understanding that you have about organizations, leaders, leadership, negotiations for us, for our audience. So I hope that's okay. So let's begin with knowing what are you currently working on? What are the research projects that you're working on? Tell us how to identify leaders. What are the leadership traits that are, not just bookish, but things that you have seen in your own research? How does what's worth in the entire organizational behavior worth investing into? Tell us more about working with teams, training, development, like the whole organizational part. How can you give it to us in a brief manner?
Couple of things. One is, for example, this one, which we're trying to get out, is what happens under job pressure. Do people explore or not? And we're finding support for it. Then there's another one which you're looking for, and almost everything up here is one of the papers, is here. Is we're looking at, for example, do leadership lose mojo? When do they lose followers? Because everybody talks about leadership development. We don't talk about death of leadership. Okay. So we are finding people who are elected are more likely to lose support of their followers than those who are nominated or selected into position.
Elected versus nominated.
Yes. Okay. It's almost like your followers feel most disappointed when you have been elected through the process and something bad comes up. Okay. Also, people who are leaders who are Machiavellian tendencies, they tend to lose followers much faster when it comes out. I'm looking at a couple of things. I'm also looking at why companies are investing in training and development. And if you're doing so, will it always lead to improvement in your profitability or sales? For example, should you even train everybody? Or should you just train few selective people? Okay. And
you hope to find an answer for this?
Oh, we have an answer. We have a tentative answer. We are just putting and writing all this together. So I have a data set of about 600 companies from India about last 10 years.
There are patterns.
There are patterns. There are clear patterns. See, at the end of it, we are looking for general broad patterns. which we can all make sense of. It really doesn't matter, right? So what we are saying is, if it's a very competitive marketplace you are in, you should not try to train everybody. It's waste. Your profitability is going down because there's no difference between your company, your firm, and other firm. Everybody is in a very competitive market.
Right.
And then you are investing money to train people. Okay. Doesn't lead to any benefit. Actually leads to loss of revenue. Okay.
Yeah.
You should not do that. I know it's not. It won't go correctly.
Doesn't
political.
sound very well.
It doesn't sound very well politically.
Yeah.
But that's what happens if you care about that. Simply because people who are getting trained, they're moving to somewhere else. Maybe I don't know. I don't have all the answers. But it doesn't seem to give you any advantage because it's a very competitive marketplace, right? And that's why people can flip from one company to another.
So might as well, if the team's performance is not so great, then instead of training them to update, might as well get somebody who's already trained and
whatever. All I'm saying is look at the degree of competition in your industry.
Degree of competition
in industry. But if the degree of competition is low, there are only few major players. Then go ahead and train some of the chosen ones. If you have to select what makes a person high performer from a low performer, analysis, what we know, 70% of it can be explained by just two things. One, intelligence, and second, conscientiousness, which is a personality measure. It's a big 5 personality measure, for example, which is now the dominant measure of looking at it. That everybody in every society, in every country, they have a personality scale on 5 dimensions.
Okay. What are those?
Some people call it ocean, big 5. So one is, when I say ocean as a mnemonic, O is for openness to experience.
Openness to experience
or new ideas. People who are creative, artists, painters, scientists, you have to be open to new ideas. Again, it doesn't really explain in every situation.
Sure.
Okay, it's not so important. It's important in certain domains, but not important in every domain. I mean, think about it. You don't want accountants to be high on openness to experience.
Right.
Who wants a creative accountant? I mean, there are, but you need people who will follow rules and apply it consistently, right? So you have to measure the openness to experience.
Yeah.
And by the way, none of these personality measures are inherently good or inherently bad. We are what we are.
Yeah.
Right. So we have some score on each of these dimensions.
Sure.
On a continuous scale. The second one is conscientiousness. C, the big C, as we call it. That is one thing which has been most important personality dimension across domains, across countries, across everything.
Tell us more about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Think about this, for example. And people have looked at academic performance, school-going performance. There are kids who will do their homework religiously.
Right.
Without being told, without being anything. Versus those who will barely somehow manage it.
Yeah.
If possible, they'll try not to do it.
Yeah.
Okay. So people who are conscientious are orderly, they are driven, they are before time for a meeting. Okay, they are structured. Okay, and that works. That is so important. Then the third is extroverts, right?
Okay.
People who speak a lot. I mean, that's an occupational hazard for someone like me because you have to speak up. Pretty much on demand.
Yeah.
But some of us are not so much on an extrovert. We are introverts. We generally like to leave. And there was a time I can totally empathize that I was one of those introverts. But just leave me alone unless I have required. Leave me. I'll be fine doing my own work in my own thing.
Yeah.
And people are introvert. People are extrovert.
Right.
It seems there is a genetic basis to it. People who are extrovert, they need a certain dopamine, and the only way you get it is by speaking up. So you need that. Okay.
Oh.
So.
And the ones who are introvert don't
need it. They don't need it. They're good. They're good. Just because, by the way, extraversion has got nothing to do with confidence. Okay, let me put it this way, or competence. Okay, but people who are extrovert are seen as natural leader.
Right.
Because we are speaking up.
Yeah.
You are seen in every party, every social gathering. Okay.
Yeah.
Somebody fills up the gaps literally.
Yeah. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So they have an advantage in being a natural leader.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
The fourth part of is agreeableness of ocean or a big five personality.
What's that?
Agreeableness.
Agreeable.
Are you agreeable? Are you easy to get along? Good teammates. You know, people, some of them are there and some of them are extremely disagreeable.
Right.
They'll fight on everything. I mean, they feel like, oh my God, how do I deal with this person? Right? But again, agreeable people are good as teammates, but they're not likely to become a team leader. Part of as a leadership is you have to take a certain stand, which is a bit different at times from the prevailing, whatever the mood is.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
But if you're an agreeable person, most times what happens is you end up hurting your own interests and all.
And you're just going with the flow.
You go with the flow.
Yeah.
It comes naturally to you that it's okay, not to disturb anything.
Not to confront.
Not to confront.
Yeah.
So they were not going to get into conflicts.
Yeah.
But they're not going to totally change the mood or anything in a group, right?
Yeah.
And the final stuff is neuroticism. Neurotic. N for neurotic. The other side you think of as emotional stability, right?
Yeah.
People who are neurotic, they get angst, they get nervous, a lot of anxiety, right?
Yeah.
And again, it's not that it's necessarily bad, and I start with there, because people who are nervous and risky, they're very good at sensing risks, for example, or foreseeing scenario planning where things may go wrong. They will tell you 5 different things which may go wrong, right? You need some of these folks in the right. So what matters is our personality has to be aligned with the work we are doing, so that we naturally, we grow and we thrive in that climate.
Wow.
When we do things, and this is the whole notion of fit, is that when we are placed in situation which is not in our natural fit, yes, we can do it, but it's a struggle.
Yeah.
Okay. It's a struggle because this is not who we normally are. We are putting on a show and we can all go through it, but it's a little pain. So ideally, if you can find a vocation where your personality matches with what the requirements are, you're golden.
But as a leader, how does one really identify कि उसके खुद के traits क्या हैं? So there are things that I, as a leader, feel that, okay, these are my traits, these are my strengths, or this is the way I operate. And then there are things that the other people tell me that, okay, this is how you are, this is what you are. So which one is me? And how do I really identify that this truly defines me? And I believe there are a lot of leadership styles in the books. But out of that, how do I really decide that which is really my style, the one that I feel it is, or the one that people tell me?
Oh, excellent point. I mean, that's what we say. If you're measuring something, if you ask your self-report, a lot of these are initially measured by self-reports.
Yeah.
That was the easiest way to respond.
I think I am so.
I think I am such and such.
Yeah.
But that leads into this problem that I'm just trying to say things which is socially desirable because that's the right thing to say.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So then I know a lot of my friends and colleagues who are scholars who are doing this, that they said, let's ask others. Maybe their spouse, maybe their colleagues. Okay, let's take their impression of what this person is like.
Right.
That's another way of doing it.
Right.
And, there's a huge agreement that if you use the right tests, and some of the tests are online for free, you have to just know this is the right ones, instead of just a fun example or a survey, there's a huge, so what people did is self-reports and the other reports, they actually correlate pretty strongly. Okay, that's the second way. Now, what people are doing now is there are other people who are running computer codes. Okay, so even if I can find your interviews or I can get your video recordings and transcript, I can run computer codes on it and I can tell you what's your personality. Okay, and there are scripts for it.
Yeah, scripts for it.
So there's a third way to look at it, right? So also there are people who, there are scripts to even measure your emotions, our emotions, for example. Right. So these are all different ways of measuring, but we're trying to measure the same thing at the end of it.
What are the best practices to be a researcher? What are those skill sets, those qualities that if one has, they can almost assume that they can be good at research?
There's Nobel Prize winner, Coase, who said back that, we're in the business of torturing data till it confesses. Okay. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. A lot of times you keep trying whatever, the data is not going to sing the way you want it. Okay. That is what it is.
Yeah.
Right?
Oops.
So you have to respect everybody and the evidence that this is probably, I started on a wrong track. I wanted to, I have my assumptions which I wanted to prove. Maybe it didn't work out. So you have to be a little curious. You have to be open, right? That's why I call it research, I guess. You have to search again, I guess.
Yeah.
Once research,
Yeah.
So it helps to have curiosity. It helps to have good quantitative or qualitative, any kind of methods-wise, ability to deal with different kinds of data.
Yeah.
Nowadays, everything is data. It's not just number. You have text, you have audio, video, everything is a data.
Right.
So you have to be aware that there are many, many ways of data. It's primary data, there's a secondary data, there is a archival information which is available.
Yeah.
A lot of it in databases, so you have to know that. And the process of, the best thing is to figure out, okay, now that you have a research question, most important is the research question. What are you asking?
Right.
Does it even matter?
Yeah.
Both from academic as well as practitioner was bigger problem. So you have to pick those questions, right? And slowly it comes to it. A lot of it is phenomena driven.
Yeah.
We don't have paucity of problems, not in this country.
Not at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
There are too many problems for which we don't have good enough answers. So pick up something in which you're passionate about, you're willing to spend time. That's way more important than trying to get to somebody in a very different area or something which you cannot, you can't fake your interest, I guess.
Yeah.
So pick something you're passionate about, pick some of these questions, and then talk to people. How do you handle it? How do you solve it? Where do we get for solutions, right? That's a broad process. Once you have a question, then you go ahead and test it. There has to be some measure, some ways to test it. And once you do it, you write it up for an audience. And then it goes to people who are experts in the field. Okay? But without your name. So there is an editing process. That's how it works. So I'm also a reviewer. I'm also a writer. Okay. So I'm also a reviewer for people who are working in some of the fields. I'm there. And they may be in very different countries. They may even no idea who's the person doing it. Okay? And only people who are even sending papers are those already in the top schools. Because you have to first be mentored and know how to write one.
Yeah.
If nobody ever did it, how will you learn?
Yeah.
That's what the whole PhD and the whole academia is. It's like an internship. It's like, we intern under a lot of people, literally, and you understood the basics of how do you get those things. And once you have these, you write all this, you send it out to some of these journals. They will send it to the reviewers, 2 or 3 you don't know, and hopefully they like it. 80% of it die in the desk reject, as we call it. Okay. And once it's done, those journal articles becomes the input for people like, say, consulting companies, for example, who will use the basic idea and they will say, okay, now we know the solution. This works. We will sell it. And of course, they will have a much better way of, better PowerPoints and better ideas. But basically you're taking an actual solution and you're selling it to others to solve similar problems around the globe, right? Yeah. That's their part.
Yeah.
Then there are people who write, who are great authors. I'm thinking of people like Malcolm Gladwell. What he does, he reads all these research papers and they put it together in an easy to understand for the broader masses.
Yeah.
Okay, so what you're doing is you are of course you take liberty with what is there, but it's a great way of what you can evangelizing, for lack of a better word. You have certain findings, something which are so important, and you put it together as a story, right? Which people read. And then there are people who write textbooks, for example. It's another set. Where they to write from? Of course, based out of these research papers. You have all the evidence and you put it together as though this is what is going on, And then there are people who will read from this textbook and teach others. So it depends on where you are in this food chain. you might be 15, 20 years behind the current thinking.
The collective knowledge.
It's a collective knowledge.
Yeah.
And all of us are trying to build on something, question sometimes what we call as accepted norms and assumptions. Sometimes they don't work out.
Yeah.
You know, and
it's an assumption.
It's an assumption, and people kept beating about it, thinking it must be true, it must be true.
Yeah.
Then they realized, we have been barking up the wrong tree. You know.
Some examples? Something that common man could relate to, like a example that reminds you of how things were being worked on an assumption and then it wasn't really.
So, for example, there was a time when you can, at least in academia, it was known that personality does not matter, at least at workplace.
Okay.
It's all behaviors. What we do, what we act, if you can observe, that's what is doable. This all thing about personality and all seems good stuff, squishy stuff. It doesn't matter. Okay. And so nobody wanted to study personality because you're talking about something which probably, why should we care about it? Okay. And nobody did for a long, long time. Of course, it led to benefits and, in movement in other things. People started looking at experiment, they started looking at certain other things, and we learned a lot of things.
Sure.
But we moved away from this thing called, say, personality matters, right? And then there are folks like Costa, McCrae, who said, well, we have not been measuring it properly to start with.
So does the core personality really matter? Like, is it something that you're born with, or that core personality that gets you in the leadership position or gets you at the top of wherever you want to be? Can it be developed?
One of my former professors I learned from, Murray Barrick and his colleague Mick Mount, they showed one of the first evidence back in 1991 that personality matters and it impacts performance at workplace. And that paper was cited like one of the most cited in the 1990s in the psychology stuff.
Not accepted.
Accepted, totally accepted. Because the question is said, you know what, we thought it doesn't matter, but it matters. And you had the evidence, they used something called meta-analysis, which is nothing but a summary of all studies.
Right.
Because every study has a problem. And I learned from one of the masters in the field, Frank Smith, said there is a way. The reason we see things are different is not because things are different. It's because we have problems in each of the individual studies.
Right.
You should combine things and then see what is the collective wisdom.
Wow.
Okay.
But Professor, today with internet, the research has taken a completely different dimension, isn't it? Like, it's no more about referencing from those 10 books at the same time, library, reviewing, verifying it from different best known authors. It's not really so much of that. It's like really just about Google as the first thing for most people. And youngsters being youngsters, little impatient. I've also experienced that for youngsters, like the moment they go finding out something, whatever comes as the first answer or the first few answer, they will take it as a truth. So when you're working on something really serious and that truth really matters and that fact really matters, how do you cross-verify it? Or how do you even verify what you've got is correct?
Yeah, so that's another part of it, right? How do you verify things?
Yes.
I mean, thankfully there are sources which are verifiable and genuine rather than stuff which is not so. I mean, anything passes for a research, unfortunately. So you have to be careful as to what we are talking about, right?
So verify.
And the more you have to, at the end of it, it doesn't end with your research just getting an answer. You should be able to disseminate and present it in front of an audience, whosoever with the audience.
Right.
Can you defend yourself? Based on whatever you're finding, right? If you can defend yourself, you probably did a decent job. So if you can, a good research is somebody, I don't really care what's your, ideology or whatever it is. You tell me something and I says, yes, if I take A, B, C, these steps, I will come to the same conclusion as you have come. That's what we are trying to say. There's no other alternative explanation other than what you are telling me.
So how does one get themselves out of the comfort zone?
Well, you can't, but you can create emergency situations or something, and it has to be driven from the top. that if we don't do it, the consequences are immense if we fail. Think of companies which pretty much disappeared overnight. There's so many of them, right?
Yeah.
Kodak moment.
Yeah.
Used to shoot those films.
Yeah.
Nowhere.
Yeah, it's nowhere.
We talk about BlackBerry, which was there at one point of time. Talk about those.
Yeah.
It's still there, but no longer what was supposed to be.
Yeah.
Right. And it's happening in so many places. Fax machines, pagers, right? Who talks about them?
Yeah. It's gone.
It's gone.
Yeah.
Landlines disappearing slowly.
Yeah.
Okay. Chances are it will disappear in maybe a decade or so max. I don't know.
The max.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So it's not just the technology and the services which goes out of fashion. There are people associated with those industry, those occupation. The jobs die literally.
Yeah.
They no longer exist. So
people get tired?
Well, suddenly you find one day that the company no longer exists, the industry no longer exists, and it's a painful situation to be in.
But for that organization which ceased to exist, it can't be an overnight thing. It's a subtle process.
Yes. In most cases, people have been talking about it. They're raising internally their voices. They're speaking up. But somebody at the top or people who are decision makers, they didn't really catch on those signals.
Right.
Or they ignored those warning signals.
Right.
Literally.
Right.
And that's how it happens. And sometimes we talk about Xerox. Xerox is synonymous for photocopy.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
But Xerox was known for technology innovation. There's a Palo Alto, which is where the Stanford is come, Palo Alto Research Center Park.
Yeah.
They were doing all kinds of things, which people who were running on the East Coast in US, New York with the Xerox people, they never understood. Apple CEO, Microsoft CEO, I'm talking about Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, they all went and they started their company based on what Xerox Palo Alto Research Center was doing.
But Apple it wasn't accepted within Xerox.
Within the Xerox. They missed out.
Oh.
So innovation was done within Xerox, but they couldn't sell it because they were so far removed and they couldn't understand what these guys are talking about. The mouse we talk about, it was invented in Palo Alto. Okay. The whole graphic user interface, the way we see the screens and all invented at Xerox.
At Xerox.
At Xerox. It's there documented. So it's not enough to just innovate and do that. You have to make sure it gets accepted there. Otherwise, there are others who learned from it. They got inspired. It says, wow.
Took it
and started their own company, which is now at the top of the world,
So you're saying that the leaders probably don't listen to the entire funnel or the people who are giving the feedback. But ये क्यों होता है? What overrules commitment?
See, I'll say everybody who rises to the top, they're exceptional people.
Right.
Let me first say that.
Sure.
They have been exceptional in what they're doing and they have done something in order to be there. So that's the first thing. Let's not take anything away from that.
Yeah.
Right. Now, and sometimes we talk about this, like the higher you go, both the quality and quantity of feedback goes down. Goes down. Nobody is willing to tell you the real stuff. Okay. Or what comes out is watered down so much so that when it comes to after 5 revisions through the chain, it looks like this doesn't seem like much of a problem. Because you want to be correct, you want to highlight, but you never have, the people who are at the front lines don't have access to people at the top most times. And if
so nobody is hiding, but it gets diluted.
It gets diluted a lot of times. And sometimes it doesn't even reach. Also, the other thing is if you're looking, at this point in time, you're looking at a present outcome.
Yeah.
You're looking at firm performance, you're looking at, share market, accounting standards, whatever it is. If everything is seeming good, just a huge cost shift. Huge cost. And this is what this whole notion of should you exploit your existing strengths or should you explore new technologies and new products and services?
And you don't know the answer of either of this in advance.
The answer is both are important. You have to pretty much future protect yourself by exploring new ideas.
Yeah.
But you can't give up on what is working out.
Yeah.
That's why you have the iPhones and the Samsung will keep coming up with 13, 14, 15, 16, a new model.
Yeah.
They're exploiting the existing technologies.
Right.
Microsoft Windows has just changed from 95, 98, 2000. I mean, you keep adding a version,
Yeah.
but it's pretty much the same of
the base works.
Base works, and you make
Yeah.
some tweaks and you do, and you keep exploiting your technology and stuff.
Keep scaling from there.
Okay, scaling there.
Yeah.
What if there's a totally new technology which comes up and totally you're blindsided? And that's why you have to keep looking for newer things that are going out there.
Mm.
And you have to slowly give a little bit of leeway for some part of it to keep running those experiments so that you're ready for, you're future-proofing yourself, literally.
Yeah. And what about those large companies, the multinational companies, where their operations take them from one country to another? Now, organization is the same, but countries have different culture, different people. And if the leader is the same person, just because the cultures are changing now from one country to another, could that become a limiting factor for the leader to operate, to grow, to take the vision of the organization forward? As in, can the culture become bigger than the person? And if yes, then what sort of leaders are actually able to navigate across cultures?
Most importantly, you have to first be accepted in the culture you're going in.
Right.
And that's why sometimes people are very strong in their domestic market and they struggle to go out. They struggle simply because you are not willing to change and modify your practices to comply, and not just legal requirements. There are economic requirements, legal requirements, expectations. Okay.
And what do you recommend? How can somebody create the culture? Whether it's at a starting point or it's somewhere ongoing. But we all talk about having a great culture, setting up a culture. But how to even do that?
It's a tough one. So there are a couple of ways. Number one, the founder himself or herself creates a culture.
Right.
Okay. Second, rituals. You can have all hands meet. You can go out for certain things. When do you work? What do you do? A lot of rituals are set up initially. Then there are stories of superheroes, the super heroines in the workforce. Just look up to this person. This is the person who is a really star in this organization. So we create role modelings initially based on that, right? Yeah. So, and you perpetuate some of these things that this is what we value, right? And then you have to act that way. And if you are consistent in it, it goes on. You don't have to do much.
People pick it up. So since you, the professor who teaches negotiation to everybody, is here, for the absolute beginners, please teach us what is negotiation and how to negotiate.
So at the core of it, I'm talking about people who are concerned or trying to achieve their objectives, whatever that might be. Okay. Somebody just wants peace. Somebody wants to watch a movie. Somebody wants, me time for whatever it is.
Yeah.
We are trying to achieve our own objectives.
Correct. Yeah.
The problem is that really align. Okay. So, and parties are interdependent. That means if you want that, you are kind of dependent, explicit or tacit support from others. So for a kid, they're dependent on parents. Parents will somewhat that the kid should behave in a certain way.
Yeah.
You want all that, right?
Yeah.
And that happens even at workplace. You want employees to follow certain things, right? And so parties are trying to achieve their objectives, literally. Now, how do you do that? And I say homework helps in terms of planning a thing. How many parties are we talking about? Okay. Because sometimes we skip some of the important parties who can make or break a decision. Okay. I call it the hidden parties.
Yeah.
Okay. Are they on board or no?
Yeah.
Or at least are we doing things in a way which will keep them pleased? So they're not going to, they'll say, bless the...
But you're saying we often forget about them. Ignore them.
Ignore them. We think as if we are the ultimate decision maker and everything will work. Even at home, sometimes you realize, oh, of course, you're not the ultimate decision maker. It's a joint decision making or other people are also involved. Right. So first you have to be careful that am I the main decision maker? Are we the ones? Or it will go to another skip level, another one level, maybe.
Wow.
That's important.
Great.
Right?
Yeah.
So think of those parties.
Yeah.
Second, think of the issues. What do we want? Okay. A lot of times we don't spend too much time thinking through what is it that we want. And we get stuck on position. I want this much money. I want this much profit. I want this much sales. But why? Okay. What is it that's driving that?
And what will happen if we get it?
If we get it. Because if you keep that, you have to move away from some of this position to interest as to why we are doing it. You will find people may help you reach the same thing in multiple different ways.
So this is about at an individual level, the negotiation part that you're saying. How does it look for organization? If the organization has to negotiate, has to do well, then do the traits and the process become any different? Same here.
Oh, even if it's organization, no organization is immune. We are working with the ecosystem of our vendors, suppliers, long-term vendors.
Yes.
Because we need them, certain key things. We probably don't have any expertise. We have to work with someone in every case.
Yes.
Right. So then you are talking about, okay, how does this company is going to help me reduce my cost, keep up my quality, improve profitability, whatever it is.
And what's the value of that?
What is the value of that? Right? What is that you bring to the table, which makes it so attractive? And in return, what am I trading off?
Yeah.
Right? What can I give you so that I help this ecosystem? And that's why a lot of big companies are also having an ecosystem of the suppliers behind it.
Right. More than one.
More than one. We're talking about hundreds and thousands of them, especially the larger ones. And many of them have been doing with the same company for many, many years or generations.
They're comfortable.
They're comfortable.
Yeah.
Even soda companies. I mean, you think about Coke and Pepsi and all, they work with the same vendor, the same bottling plant for many decades.
And what can be the pitfalls in a negotiation process? Like a leader would be really negotiating it well, winning it all through. But what are those attributes, styles, way of working that if that comes in, it can actually kill everything that you've won so far?
The first thing is, do we realize we are biased? Okay, we are biased. We are not rational. We are not just rational people. Okay, we fall for certain things. Okay. We fall for certain things. It's not necessarily that we are always looking for the big of the company. Sometimes there are things which gives me personal interest.
Right.
And then my objective changes. Okay. So the pitfall, first thing is, well, we're not like robots, okay? We're human beings. We have our own objectives, our own interests. And this is what I call, sometimes we fall in love with a certain part of the deal. Maybe I like dealing with a certain vendor. Maybe I like the person. Maybe I like the technology, or maybe I like some part of it.
So bias comes in.
And then I can't see any other option.
Right.
Because, this is what I'm comfortable with. Even if somebody else comes up with a totally new one, I'm very skeptical. I've never dealt with you. I've never dealt with your technology. I don't know what you're talking about.
Then we're not in for a fair negotiation.
We are not. Let's not open event to talk sense. So one of the biggest problem is we don't listen enough. Everybody is sharing some information which can help me. But we are so preoccupied by our own, driven by our objectives, our KRAs, our what is this, what I'm doing, I'm bringing to the table, that we miss out on those cues, things which others are saying.
And does one's emotional intelligence play a role in negotiation?
I'll back off. Instead of saying emotional intelligence, I'll say, do emotions play a role? I'll go even back. Does intelligence play a role? Yes. Okay. Does emotions play a role? Of course. Okay.
Yeah.
A lot of times things don't go through simply because of emotions. And we can't check our emotions.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, you have been told a lot of times, leave emotions outside the door. I'm sorry, it doesn't really happen.
Yeah.
If you're in a sad mode, you're in an angry mode, that persists. That colors our emotions.
Right.
Right? So yes, emotion matters. Okay. And yes, we should be aware of it. Having said that, you can't address emotions. What we can address is, don't worry about emotions. Think about what is driving those emotions. Okay, calls it core concerns model. And that's about how can you build affiliation? Can you show respect? Can you give autonomy to the other person? You know,
in spite of what your emotions are.
in spite of emotions, because emotions are there. I have emotion, you have emotion, all of us are carrying our own emotions.
Yeah.
Right? You don't have to watch an Inside Out movie from Disney to come to that we have emotions. Right. Yes, we have.
Yeah, we have.
And it impacts us.
Yeah.
It impacts our negotiation outcomes.
Yeah.
But it's important to be aware of it. Also keep the rational part also. Let's not forget, why are we getting into negotiation? Why are you getting into it? And that brings me probably to the second part, that the outcome of a negotiation can be measured in two different ways. Actually, three. One, pure economic value,
right,
which individually I derive from it.
Right.
Second, the joint economic value all of us together created. Okay. And third, a subjective value. Did I really like this process? My perception and your perception, that's a subjective value.
Right.
Okay. So we can be doing very badly on economic value and we'll be doing very happy as subjective because we think, oh, awesome, you're liking it. And then we don't have much to show, but that's a different thing. Or vice versa. We may not really love the process. We might hate this process. I probably don't want to deal with you ever again.
Yeah.
But we both actually did very well. You know,
financially
or any of those economically.
Yeah.
I still am not happy dealing with the person.
Right.
So you have to be careful about the economic value and the subjective value.
And it would most often be one of it?
It will most often be both of it. Having said that, there are certain issues which are pure fixed sum resources. We call it distributive resources. I win, you lose. Like money, for example.
Right.
Or number of people we have. You know, there are only so many people. I mean, if they get involved in one project, they are not available for something else.
Right.
So these are purely win-lose issues, actually. But they are part of a negotiation. The question is, do we understand which part we should be competitive, which part we should be collaborative? Okay.
Right.
For example, we know intelligence matters. Just general intelligence. Think of it. All our competitive exams, they're nothing but a test of general intelligence.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Verbal knowledge, quantitative knowledge, okay? Or data analysis, which is nothing but, so verbal, quantitative, all of these stuff are nothing but components of general intelligence.
Yeah.
Which is what is being tested in every competitive exam.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it explains a whole variety of things. Your outcomes. Does it mean intelligence in itself is enough?
No.
And it's not enough when everybody is of a slightly similar level of intelligence. Right? Then it comes, okay, then you have to look at other things. What about your personality? Are you conscientious? Are you trying? You're motivated enough, driven to achieve something.
Yeah.
And that can be the differentiator over people who are probably all similar intelligent level, for example.
Thank you. Perfect. So I feel I've got an IIM degree today, concise in a 1 hour, but all thanks to you that you've taken out all your years of experience and compiled it in a capsule for us. Thank you very much. Very informative. For me as an individual, as a person, running some organization, and also as an audience, like very, very demystified and simplified. Great help. Thank you very much. So I hope we are able, through the podcast, we're able to take these words of wisdom to the young people. The best of the CEOs, CXOs to aapke paas pahunch hi jayenge. But hopefully podcast ke through just the absolute youngsters, jinko shayad nahi access hoga aapse ek baat sunne ka. Really hope we're able to do that and it reaches people. Thank you for your time. So asking the why, even in a negotiation time, even if when we're winning the negotiation, what Professor Amit is saying that we must check on why are we even negotiating and what are we negotiating for. Of course, before we start that, most of us would have that clarity that what are we trying to achieve out of that negotiation. But the learning point is that even at various points of the negotiation, we keep rechecking that what is it that we want at this point of time. And what's very powerful is when he says that negotiation is a collective win, because no matter what you're negotiating, there are always others involved. And this reminds me of another podcast that we did with a serial entrepreneur, Milap Singh Jadeja. So his podcast we had called The Man Who Burnt Many Bridges. So that's because, like all throughout his various businesses that he did, some worked, some did not work, some negotiations that he did backfired, while some worked out so very well for him that at one point when it looked like that he's bankrupt and he has to close down, sell everything, next moment, not literally, but symbolically, next moment onwards, he started building what he's right now sitting on and can be easily called as an empire. So just the difference between one day of negotiation to another day of negotiation, that makes him a very good investor and a very good entrepreneur today. The other example of people who do larger than life achievements, visions, and make things happen is our guest Joy Bhattacharya, who at one point of time was the core team of creating Indian Premier League, IPL? Indian Premier, no, IPL, Indian Premier League. Oh. And the next person who comes to my mind, because there are some people who actually can take a vision and execute it at such a phenomenal level that it's really impossible to even think about it. That person is Joy Bhattacharya. So at one point, he was the core team of IPL, the Indian Premier League, the most loved format of cricket that the world talks about today, and India is rejuvenated because of that. He has been the core part of the team which created that. So taking Lalit Modi's vision and his idea, but actually executing it was him. So that's a man who negotiated, how much he would have negotiated, at what all ends he would have negotiated and continuously negotiated, is an example that we will learn from his podcast. He's also building the Indian Volleyball League now. So the man is up to another amazing level in the radar. So you must hear that out. And of course, Shrikant Shastri, who's an angel investor, a serial entrepreneur, who out in his podcast keeps talking about why businesses fail, why businessmen fail, why entrepreneurs fail, what sets up one entrepreneur from another entrepreneur. ये सारी बातें ऐसी हैं जो हमने कई बार सुनी होती हैं, बहुत बार सुनी होती है और जानते भी हैं. But a great conversation can actually bring out a point जो हमने पहले सुना होता है but कभी शायद पहले रजिस्टर नहीं किया होता है, उस मोमेंट पे कर जाता है. ये सारी conversations मैं उस रेफरेंस से आपको recommend करूँगी. Even if you know it all, go listen. I promise you there's value for you sitting out there. I hope you enjoy Keep Flirting with a Fish.